I always thought infidelity was something that happened to other people. In our cozy world of weekend brunches and gentle goodnight kisses, my wife and I felt untouchable. We were the envy of our friends, or so I believed. Perhaps that's why I missed the early signs of trouble, because I wasn't looking for them. But hindsight is a cruel teacher. It wasn't one big revelation that shattered my trust, but a collection of small things. A faint whiff of an unfamiliar cologne on her blouse one evening. A new password on her phone that I hadn't been told about. The way Megan, my wife of 7 years, started humming to herself with a secret smile after checking her messages. None of it made sense at first. It was all too subtle, too easy to brush off. At least, it was until the first Tuesday of October, when one of those small things finally cut deep enough to draw blood. That night, Megan came home late from her usual girls' night out. She always had a standing Tuesday meetup with 2 friends from college. Wine, laughter, and venting about work. I never minded. In fact, I encouraged her to unwind with her friends. But that Tuesday, she returned nearly 2 hours later than usual. I was lounging on the sofa, reviewing a deposition on my laptop, the curse of being a corporate attorney, when I heard her key jiggling at the door close to midnight. "Hey, sorry I'm late," Megan called out as she slipped off her heels. I looked up to see her leaning against the doorway, cheeks flushed not with guilt, but with a kind of breathless excitement. She tried to hide it, smoothing her chestnut brown hair as if that could pat down her glowing aura. She looked radiant, too radiant for someone who just spent an evening gossiping over Merlot. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my tone light. I clicked my laptop closed. My eyes took in the details. Her slightly smudged mascara, the way her blouse, one of her nicer ones, low-cut and silky, was misbuttoned by 1 notch. She hardly ever got careless about her appearance. "Yeah, fine," she said breezily, dropping her purse on the console table. "Just lost track of time, you know how Jenny can get after a couple glasses of wine." She waved a hand as if that explained everything. I nodded slowly. Jenny was one of her girlfriends. And yes, she had a reputation for chattering on. The excuse wasn't implausible, still, something was off. Megan avoided my gaze just a split second too long as she brushed past me with a quick peck on my cheek. There it was. That scent. A warm, woodsy cologne that didn't belong to me clung to her hair and clothes. It was subtle. Maybe she hugged someone. Perhaps one of her friends wore a new perfume, but it smelled distinctly masculine. "Jenny got a new perfume?" I asked casually, my heart thumping harder than it should for such an innocuous question. Megan paused on the stairway, her back to me. Perfume? Oh, yeah, she might have." "I didn't notice," she replied, not turning around. Her tone was just a touch too bright. I watched her continue upstairs, each step measured. When I heard the bedroom door close, I stood in the living room for a long minute, mind whirring in low gear. Was I being paranoid? Work had been stressful lately. Maybe I was on edge. I tried to shake it off, but the unease stuck to me like that strange cologne. Upstairs, I found Megan already in bed, the covers pulled up. Her phone was on the nightstand, face down. She never used to bother hiding her screen from me. We often showed each other funny texts or photos freely. Tonight, though, her phone sat screen down, silently guarded by that new passcode I didn't know. I got into bed beside her, my legal papers abandoned downstairs. The only case on my mind now was my own marriage. "Did you have fun?" I asked gently. She turned toward me in the darkness. I could make out her silhouette, the outline of her shoulders, and the curve of her hip under the quilt. She reached out and traced a finger along my forearm. I did. It's nice to see the girls and blow off some steam. Her touch was warm, familiar. It would have been so easy to accept that, to roll over and push aside my doubts. Instead, I probed just a little more. You were out pretty late. Was everything open that long? Megan's finger paused in its slow circles on my skin. She gave a soft laugh. Oh, we ended up at that new rooftop bar after dinner. Lost track of time. Sorry, I should have texted. I forced a chuckle, hoping it sounded natural. No worries. I was just about to send a search and rescue team. She giggled and snuggled closer, seemingly content. We lay there quietly, but my mind refused to settle. In my line of work, I live by evidence and facts, and the evidence in front of me didn't add up. Her story was plausible, yet something primal in my gut told me there was more. As Megan's breathing slowed into the rhythm of sleep, I stared at the ceiling, counting off the discrepancies. The new secrecy with her phone, the extra effort in her appearance, the evasiveness about the perfume. A creeping dread was pooling in my chest, cold and heavy. In court, I've learned how to identify when someone's holding back, not telling the whole truth. And here it was, the hitch in her voice, the extra flourish of detail to cover a lie of omission. I didn't have proof of anything, not yet. But that night, I admitted to myself a terrible possibility. My wife might be having an affair. Once the thought lodged in my brain, it refused to let go. Underscore, 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 underscore. The next day at work, I could barely concentrate. I reread the same contract draft 5 times without absorbing a word. My mind kept drifting back to Megan, her easy laugh, that too bright tone on the stairs, and that unfamiliar scent. By lunchtime, I decided I needed facts more than I needed to bill another hour. One advantage of handling corporate cases is that I'm no stranger to digging through records. That skill set proved handy when it came to my personal life. I logged into our cell phone provider's online portal. We shared a family plan, and I paid the bills. It wasn't unusual for me to access the account to review charges, so my snooping wouldn't leave a trace. My heart pounded as I navigated to the call and text history for Megan's phone. There it was, a number I didn't recognize, showing up again and again at odd times. Late-night calls when I was already asleep. Lunchtime calls when I knew I wasn't around. Dozens of text messages back and forth with that same number, particularly on Tuesday nights and even a few during work hours. I clicked on the number, which brought up the contact info on the account. Thomas, work. My stomach clenched. Thomas? She never mentioned a Thomas from work to me before. Megan was an HR manager at a mid-sized tech company downtown. I racked my brain. Had I met a Thomas at any of the company parties? Possibly a new hire or someone from another department. It could be innocent, some work project or a colleague going through a personal crisis. But the volume and timing of those messages belied a simple, professional relationship. No one texts their HR manager at midnight on a Saturday for business reasons. I scribbled the number down and decided to do a little digging of my own. A quick Google search for the number yielded nothing directly, so I tried a different approach. I called it from my desk phone, withholding my caller ID. It rang twice before a man answered. Hello? Just that. Plain, cautious. I hung up immediately, heart thumping. The voice was vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. If he works with Megan, I might have met him in passing. Or perhaps I'd only heard him through her phone when I'd called, and she was in a meeting. Next, I searched Megan's company website for Thomas. There were 2 listed in the directory. Thomas Keller, a senior sales manager, and Thomas Nguyen, a software engineer. Sales manager sounded more likely, more outgoing, more likely to be texting at all hours. I clicked his bio. The headshot of a smiling man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and an expensive suit stared back. The blurb said he'd been with the company for a year, brought on to lead their enterprise outreach. A memory surfaced. The last holiday party, Megan pointing out some big-shot new sales exec across the room. I hadn't paid much attention at the time. We'd had a brief introduction, just a handshake and polite nod. Now I wished I'd paid more attention. Thomas Keller, married, if I recalled right. At the holiday party, he'd had a woman on his arm, likely his wife. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. I leaned back in my office chair and exhaled slowly. If my suspicions were right, Thomas Keller was not only Megan's colleague but her lover, and also a married man. That opened a new dimension of consequences and possibilities. Rather than jump to conclusions, I knew I needed concrete evidence. Emotions aside, I was building a case now, the most important case of my life. And like any good case, I would gather evidence meticulously before proceeding. For the rest of the afternoon, I sketched out a plan in the back of my legal pad, behind the notes for my client. Step 1 was surveillance. I needed to catch them together, or at least catch her in a lie. I recalled that the coming weekend we were supposed to go to a friend's engagement party on Saturday evening. Perhaps I could see if she tried to duck out. But that was a group event. She'd likely come with me. More promising was her next girls' night out, or any sudden work emergencies cropping up. As if on cue, that evening Megan mentioned over dinner, "I might have to work late Thursday. We have an audit coming up, lots of paperwork to get in order." I kept my face neutral and nodded. "No problem. Anything I can help with?" I offered casually. She shook her head quickly. "No, it's just boring HR compliance stuff. You'd hate it," she said with a quick laugh. "I'll probably just grab a bite in the office." I smiled. "All right. Just keep me posted if it gets too late. I could swing by with dinner or something." At that, she paled just a fraction. "Oh, you don't have to do that. I'm not sure what time I'll be done. I might be in the middle of something." "Okay, no worries," I said, filing away her reaction. She didn't want me showing up. That much was obvious. After dinner, I offered to wash up while she went upstairs. She'd left her phone on the kitchen counter while it charged. A notification flashed. Just her friend Kara commenting on a Facebook post. Nothing interesting. The phone still had a passcode I didn't know. I considered trying to guess it. Spouses often know each other's codes, and in the past she'd used our anniversary or her childhood pet's name. But I hesitated. If I got it wrong too many times, it might lock or alert her somehow. I didn't want to tip her off. Instead, I noted that her phone backup was likely linked to our home computer. We had a shared iMac in the study for personal use. If her iMessage or cloud was synced, I might find something there. It was a long shot. She was fairly tech-savvy and might have disabled syncing, but worth a try. Later that night, after Megan fell asleep, I slipped out of bed on the pretext of getting a glass of water. In the dark quiet of the study, the blue glow of the iMac monitor sprang to life. I navigated to the Messages app, holding my breath as it loaded. My heart skipped. There were message threads, but mostly my own. She must have turned off sync to the computer long ago. I cursed under my breath. No easy wins. If I wanted to see her messages, I'd need another approach. Before leaving, I did one more search through the computer. In the browser history, I noticed a recent visit to a local boutique hotel's website. The kind of place couples go for discretion and luxury, not far from her office. The page had been visited earlier that week. The pit in my stomach deepened. I closed out and crept back to bed. Lying next to my wife's warm, sleeping form, I felt like I was inches away from a stranger. Each quiet breath she took irritated me more. I knew I needed to stay calm and focused. If I confronted her now in a blaze of anger, she'd clam up or deny everything, and I'd be left with nothing. No, I had to play this carefully, like a high-stakes chess match. My profession had taught me the value of patience and strategy, and I was going to use every ounce of it now. As I closed my eyes, I made a silent promise to myself. I would uncover the full truth, and then I would make both of them, Megan and her lover, deeply regret ever betraying me. Underscore, 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 underscore. Thursday arrived, and with it my chance to confirm everything. Megan left early for work, kissing me on the cheek with a half-hearted, "See you tonight." I had to wait until afternoon before making my move. I cleared my schedule after 3 p.m., claiming a personal errand. By 5:30, I was parked on a side street a block from Megan's office building, heart hammering in my chest as I watched the lobby entrance. At 5:45, I saw her. Megan stepped out under the marquee, not in her typical work blazer, but wearing the form-fitting blue dress she'd worn that morning. She had fresh lipstick on. A few paces behind her emerged Thomas Keller, exactly as I remembered from his photo. Tall, graying at the temples, sharp in his tailored suit. He glanced around briefly, then followed. I sank lower in my seat as I watched Megan stroll casually down the block, smartphone in hand, as if checking messages. Thomas kept a discreet distance, but it was clear they were together. His eyes stayed fixed on her. They rounded the corner onto a quieter side street where Thomas's black Mercedes was parked. I started my car and tailed them, staying a few cars back. My palms were sweaty on the steering wheel, adrenaline making everything hyper-clear. The flash of their car's turn signal, the fading daylight glinting off his bumper. They drove for 10 minutes, out of the downtown core, and pulled into the lot of the Linden Arms Hotel, the very boutique hotel whose website I'd seen in the browser history. I parked on the street and watched from a distance as they got out. Thomas handed his keys to the valet. Megan stood close by him now. I saw him place a hand on the small of her back as they walked through the front entrance together. My stomach turned at the sight. Once they disappeared inside, I forced myself to move. I grabbed my phone and got out of the car, approaching the hotel. My mind was in a fog of rage and pain, but a rational voice in my head kept repeating, "Get evidence, stay calm, don't get caught." In the lobby, I lingered near a large potted plant, pretending to scroll on my phone. The Linden Arms was quiet, nearly empty at this hour on a weekday. Soft jazz played over the speakers. I saw Megan and Thomas at the check-in desk. She was partially turned away, but I recognized her posture, the way she tucked hair behind her ear when she was nervous. Thomas was speaking with the desk clerk. Moments later, the clerk handed him a key card. Thomas slipped a casual arm around Megan's waist as they headed for the elevators. I snapped a photo with my phone, barely daring to raise it. The image was a bit blurry, but it clearly showed them together, his arm intimately around her. For good measure, I took another as they waited for the elevator, this time catching Megan's face in profile and Thomas standing close, his hand on her lower back. The elevator doors opened and they stepped in. Megan was smiling at something he said. Then she leaned up and kissed him softly on the lips just as the doors slid shut. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling as though I might shatter from the onslaught of emotions. White-hot anger, crushing betrayal, and almost surreal disbelief. There it was. Confirmation in living color. My wife was having an affair, right here in front of me. I wanted to scream, to rush up the stairs and pound on every door until I found them. The image of catching them in the act, really catching them, flashed in my mind, fueling my rage. But I bit it back. This wasn't the time to explode. I had what I came for. Proof. Still, a part of me couldn't just walk away. I approached the front desk, trying to steady my voice. "Excuse me, I'm supposed to meet a colleague here, but I think I'm running late," I lied to the clerk. "A woman in a blue dress just checked in with a gentleman. Did you happen to catch their room number? I forgot to ask her." The clerk gave me a polite but firm smile. "I'm sorry, sir. We don't give out that information." Of course, I left the lobby before I drew any more attention to myself. Back in my car, I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel, unsure whether to sob or scream. In the end, neither came. Instead, a cold, steely resolve washed over me, calming my shaking hands. This is what I needed, I told myself. Painful as it is, this is clarity. I had evidence of the affair now. The next steps were mine to take. I didn't have to wait long. Less than 2 hours later, I saw them exit the hotel together. Dusk had settled, and they looked relaxed, unaware of the figure watching from a parked car down the street. Megan and Thomas shared a quick kiss by her car. Then she got into her own car. She must have driven separately that morning or parked nearby, and he walked to the valet for his. They parted ways. I tailed Megan most of the way home, making sure she didn't detour someplace else. She drove straight home as if nothing at all was amiss. I arrived a few minutes after her, deliberately slamming the front door a little as I entered to announce my presence. "Hey, hun, I'm home," I called, hanging up my coat as casually as I could manage. She was in the kitchen, hair slightly damp. She must have showered immediately, washing off the scent of him, no doubt. The thought made my jaw clench. "Hi, perfect timing. I just got in too," she said brightly. Sure enough, she was dressed in comfy sweatpants now, as if she'd been lounging at the office all evening. A takeout container sat on the counter. "I picked up Thai from that place near work on my way back. Figured you might not have eaten." The audacity of her normalcy almost took my breath away. She handed me a container of my favorite basil chicken, smiling like everything was fine. I forced a smile in return. "You read my mind. I'm starved," I lied. In truth, I couldn't imagine swallowing a single bite, but I made myself sit at the table and eat a few forkfuls, each one turning to ash in my mouth. "How was the late night?" I managed to ask, eyeing her over the rim of my water glass. She rolled her eyes. "Ugh, tedious. I'm just glad I finished those reports. Thomas from sales was there late too. He had some client call, so at least I wasn't totally alone in the office." I nearly choked on the water. It took every ounce of self-control not to react. Her lie was so smooth, so casual, using him as part of her alibi no less. I wondered if she was doing it intentionally, to mix truth and lies, or if she just enjoyed saying his name in front of me, knowing I was oblivious. I nodded slowly. "Well, it's nice you had company," I said, my voice surprisingly even. Under the table, my fists were clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. We finished dinner with small talk about our days. Or rather, she talked, and I pretended to listen, occasionally murmuring agreement. In my head, a storm was raging. Part of me wanted to confront her right then, throw the photos on the table and watch her face crumble. But the calculating part of me held back. If I tipped her off now, she and Thomas would just go underground, making it harder to expose them publicly or use the evidence to my advantage. No, tonight I would play the loving, oblivious husband one last time. After dinner, we watched a show on Netflix. I put my arm around her on the couch. She snuggled into me, laying her head on my shoulder. I wondered if she could hear my heart pounding with anger and hurt. When she tilted her face up to kiss me, I kissed her back softly, masking the revulsion twisting in my gut. She tasted of wine and betrayal. Eventually, we went up to bed. Megan fell asleep easily, her conscience apparently untroubled. I remained awake for hours, staring into the dark, my arm around her as she slept against my chest. She felt so familiar, but now so unknowable. In that stillness, I made my decision. I would not confront Megan immediately. Instead, I would make preparations to protect myself, and then give her one chance to come clean. How she handled that would determine just how brutal the fallout would be. One thing was certain. I was going to make both of them pay dearly for what they'd done. Underscore, 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 underscore. 2 days later, on Saturday morning, I decided it was time. I had spent Friday making preparations, consulting quietly with a divorce attorney I trusted, gathering financial records, and thinking through exactly how I wanted this to play out. I'd scarcely spoken to Megan beyond basic pleasantries. I told her I was swamped with a big case which conveniently explained my distance. Now, with everything in place, I was ready to confront her and set the final act of my plan in motion. Megan was in the kitchen, still in her robe, humming as she brewed coffee. The late morning sun streamed through the window, and for a moment, the scene was heartbreakingly normal, my beautiful wife pouring us both coffee, asking if I wanted pancakes for breakfast. It almost softened my resolve. Almost. "Sure, sounds great," I replied gently. I waited until we sat down at the table, steaming mugs in hand. My heart thudded in my chest, but my mind was cool and focused. "There's something I've been meaning to talk about," I began, looking at the swirling black coffee rather than her. "It's about us." She tilted her head, concerned by my tone. "What is it? You know you can tell me anything." I looked up, fixing her with a steady gaze. "Can you tell me anything, Megan?" Her brown eyes widened a fraction. She opened her mouth, then hesitated. "Of course I can," she said softly. "What do you mean?" I swallowed. Even now, part of me wanted to spare her, to avoid watching the woman I loved crumble. But I reminded myself of her arms around him, her lies. "Is there anything you need to tell me? Something you've been keeping from me?" I asked. A flicker of panic crossed her face. There and gone so quickly, if I hadn't been looking for it, I'd have missed it. She forced a puzzled smile. "You're being weird, Mark. What's going on?" I hadn't told her I knew, giving her this one chance to come clean on her own. That smile, that attempt to deflect, I felt a surge of disappointment and anger. I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the photo gallery, and placed it on the table between us. The screen lit up with the photo of her and Thomas in the hotel lobby, his arm around her waist, her face unmistakable even in profile. Megan's eyes dropped to the phone. I heard her sharp intake of breath. She went utterly still, the color draining from her face. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. A single tear rolled down her cheek as she looked up at me, lips trembling. "Mark, I know," I said quietly, my voice firm. "I know everything. I know you've been having an affair with Thomas." At that, she covered her mouth with her hand, a sob escaping. Oh God. Mark, I'm so sorry. She choked out. Her eyes were huge with fear and guilt. I never meant to hurt you. I thought. She struggled for words, then gave up and started to cry in earnest. I felt a pang in my chest. Seeing her break down twisted something inside me, stirring a mix of love, anger, and a perverse satisfaction that she finally felt some measure of the pain she'd dealt me. How long? I asked, my tone colder than ice. She wiped at her cheeks, voice quavering. 6 months, she whispered. It started after the summer office party. I was upset that night. You'd had to miss it because of work, remember? Thomas was there and we just talked. I swear I didn't plan for anything to happen. He was having marital issues. We both had too much to drink. And one mistake led to another. It just kept going. She was babbling, rushing through her confession. It didn't mean anything. It was never about not loving you. I love you so much, Mark. I was stupid and lonely and... Lonely! I snapped, bitterness creeping into my voice. You have a husband who adores you, who works his ass off to give you a good life. And you were lonely? She flinched at my tone. You were always at work or busy. I felt like I wasn't exciting to you anymore. And Thomas paid attention. He made me feel attractive and wanted, and I know it's no excuse. I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry. She reached across the table as if to touch my hand, but I pulled back. The word sorry grated on me. It felt too small, too simple for the earthquake she'd brought into our lives. I let the silence hang until her hand dropped limply onto the table. Does his wife know? I finally asked. Megan shook her head. No. He said he was going to leave her. But he hasn't yet. I told him I couldn't keep doing this, that he had to decide. We fought about it. She looked down, shamefaced. I was going to end it. I swear I was trying to end it. I almost laughed at that. If I hadn't caught them red-handed on Thursday, would she have ended it at the hotel? Doubtful, but I didn't argue. Instead, I inhaled slowly, trying to quell the storm in my heart. You have no idea what you've done, I said, voice low. Do you realize the position you put me in? The risks you've taken? Did you even think about what would happen if I found out? She cried harder. I didn't think you'd ever find out. It was selfish and wrong. I was in a bad place emotionally. But I never stopped loving you. I closed my eyes for a moment. Hearing her talk about love made me almost physically ill. You have a pretty fucked up way of showing love, Megan. She continued sobbing, repeating apologies that blurred together. I stood up, unable to sit still any longer, and started pacing the kitchen. My jaw was so tight it hurt. This is the moment, I thought. This is when you decide to burn it all down or give her one last chance. Despite everything, I felt a tug in my chest. 7 years of marriage, countless memories, the life we'd built. I did love her, or at least I had profoundly loved the woman I thought she was. And in the wreckage of my heart, a small part of me wanted to salvage something. So I made a show of taking a shaky breath, as if wrestling with myself. Then I turned to face her. I'm not going to make any rash decisions right now, I said slowly. I need time to think. She looked up, eyes hopeful through the tears. Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll do anything to fix this, Mark. I held up a hand to stem the flow of her promises. This is what's going to happen, I said, injecting a note of firmness that made her sit straighter. First, you are going to end it with him, completely, today. I want you to call him right now and tell him it's over, that I know everything. Her face blanched at the thought. Perhaps she hadn't expected that directive so soon. She nodded frantically. Okay, I will. I'll do it right now. She reached for her phone with trembling hands. I watched as she scrolled to his number. Before she pressed call, she looked at me, voice trembling. Mark, I have some texts and things. Evidence. If his wife finds out, I cut her off sharply. I don't care about protecting him, or you for that matter. If his marriage blows up, that's on him, and on you. Understand? She nodded again, defeated. With a deep breath, she hit the call button and put the phone on speaker at my insistence. It rang twice before a familiar male voice answered. Hey, beautiful, Thomas crooned through the speaker. Just hearing his smug, intimate tone lit a fresh spark of rage in me. Megan's voice shook. Thomas, it's over, she said quickly, voice thick with emotion. Mark found out. He knows about everything. I told him. There was a stunned pause on the line. Then Thomas's voice came low and urgent. What? Are you serious? Megan. It's over, she interrupted, crying openly again. Don't contact me anymore. I have to fix my marriage if I still can. I could almost feel Thomas grasping for a response. Wait, let's talk about this in person, or… No, I interjected, stepping closer to the phone. My sudden participation made Megan's eyes widen. She hadn't expected me to speak. She won't be meeting you. And if you try to contact my wife again, Thomas, you'll regret it. My tone left no room for interpretation. For a moment, I thought he might try to argue. But then I heard a quiet, all right. Perhaps he realized he held no cards in this situation. The line disconnected. He had hung up. Or perhaps the shock stunned him into silence. Megan set the phone down, her hands covering her face as she sobbed. Thank you, she whispered between gasps. Thank you for giving me a chance. I promise I'll make this up to you. I'll do whatever it takes. I did not respond immediately. I simply stood there, looking at the woman who had been my whole world, now in shambles. Part of me despised her in that moment. Part of me pitied her. And part of me, the part still orchestrating this charade, felt nothing but cold resolve. Finally, I spoke, softening my voice just a little. We're going to have a long road ahead if we try to fix this. I can't promise anything, Meg. I'm hurt and angry. But I'm willing to try, for now, on a few conditions. She nodded eagerly, grasping at any hope, anything, name it. Firstly, complete honesty. From this moment on, I said. If I sense even a hint of deception, I'm done. We go straight to divorce. No discussion. Understood? Yes, of course, she said quickly. I have nothing else to hide, I promise. I almost smirked at that, but kept my face stern. Secondly, we're going to counseling. Non-negotiable. If we have any chance, we need a professional to help us work through this. She agreed without hesitation. I could see relief dawning in her expression. I'll find a therapist, whatever you want. And lastly, I continued, I need a gesture of good faith from you. Something to show me you're committed to making this right. Anything, she whispered. I had spent part of Friday drafting a document for this very moment. I retrieved it now from a drawer in the living room and placed it on the table in front of her. It was a postnuptial agreement, simple and direct. It stated that in the event of a divorce due to infidelity, specifically hers, she would waive any claim to spousal support and the majority of our joint assets, including the house which had originally been my property before marriage. It also included an infidelity clause that would heavily favor me in division of assets should she ever cheat again in the future. She stared at the document, reading it with a trembling hand covering her mouth. This would leave me with almost nothing, Mark, she said quietly, a flicker of shock on her face. I folded my arms. You're asking me to trust you after you betrayed me. Consider this my insurance. If you truly plan to stay faithful and make amends, then this paper will never come into play. If you can't commit to that, then we shouldn't be pretending to work on this at all. Megan's eyes filled anew with tears, but she pushed them back and straightened. In a small voice, she agreed. Okay. I slid a pen toward her. I'd like you to sign it now. We can get it notarized on Monday. Her hand shook as she signed her name on the line. I notarize documents regularly at work, so formalizing it would be easy later. I took the signed pages and carefully tucked them away in a folder. In that moment, Megan let out a long, shuddering breath, as if the signing had sealed some new pact between us. She gave me a tentative, broken smile. I'll make this right, Mark. I swear I will. I didn't smile back, but I did reach out and take her hand gently, squeezing it once. I hope so, I said softly. Inside, however, my emotions were far from gentle. I felt a grim satisfaction. The noose was tightening, and she had willingly placed her head in it. On the outside, I would play the part of a husband tentatively trying to forgive. On the inside, I was already counting down the days until I pulled the chair out from under everything and let her world collapse. Underscore, 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 underscore. The days that followed were a study in contrasts. On the surface, Megan and I presented the picture of a couple tentatively on the mend. True to her word, she threw herself into fixing our marriage. She scheduled a marriage counseling session for the following week. She took time off from work to focus on us, as she told me. In public, she even dared to look relieved, happy that we were getting a fresh start. In truth, I kept her close, not out of renewed affection, but to monitor and ensure she stuck to our conditions. I insisted that if she wasn't at work or therapy, I wanted her home or with me. It was partly a trust exercise, partly a way to curtail any opportunity for further deceit. She complied eagerly, grateful just to have a chance. At home, she became almost excessively attentive. She'd wake up early to make my breakfast, insist on rubbing my shoulders after a long day, spontaneously apologize at random moments with tears in her eyes. It was as if she believed that a flurry of good deeds might somehow plaster over the gaping crack her betrayal left in our foundation. I played my role well, the quietly hurt husband, trying to forgive but still skittish. I nodded somberly in counseling as she admitted her wrongdoing to the therapist, crying and calling it the worst mistake of my life. I portrayed vulnerability when describing my pain, even as inwardly I remained detached, mentally checking off the moves left in my plan. Privately, my preparations for the final blow were nearing completion. I had quietly filed the divorce petition, citing adultery with evidence attached. In our state, her infidelity would bar her from seeking alimony. And the documentation I had, photos, phone records, and even a written admission she'd given our therapist, would make that clear. The post-nuptial agreement she signed would ensure the asset division went heavily in my favor. I also made sure Thomas Keller would face his reckoning. Through discreet inquiries, I confirmed his wife's contact information. One evening, while Megan was at a therapy appointment, a solo session arranged by the counselor for each of us to process our feelings, I met with Thomas's wife, Laura. We sat on a park bench at dusk, an odd pair of strangers bound by betrayal. Laura was a composed, elegant woman in her 40s, but as I gently informed her of her husband's 6-month affair with my wife and handed her copies of the damning evidence, her composure shattered. There were tears, of course, and anger, but also a sad sort of gratitude for the truth. She suspected something for months, she admitted, but never had proof. We parted with an understanding. She planned to file for divorce immediately, and I assured her Thomas would get no warning or help from me. I also sent an anonymous tip to the HR department at Megan and Thomas's company, including photo evidence of their hotel meetups, carefully chosen images that didn't implicate myself as the photographer. It didn't take long for the corporate rumor mill to churn. By the following week, I heard through Laura that Thomas had been terminated, violating a morals clause or some internal code by having an affair with a subordinate. The irony of my wife's role in HR was not lost on anyone. Megan, who was still on leave at my insistence, would likely face scrutiny if she returned. Not that it mattered. She would soon have more pressing concerns. Everything was set. The stage for the final confrontation would be our home, once the sanctuary of our marriage, now the scene of its final collapse. I picked a day to execute my plan. A Friday, exactly 2 weeks after our kitchen table reckoning. That morning, I calmly went to the courthouse to have the divorce papers and accompanying evidence officially issued. I arranged for the server to come to our house mid-afternoon, when I knew Megan would be home. The sun was dipping low in the sky when the doorbell rang. We were in the living room. She was curled up next to me on the couch, scrolling through ideas for a weekend getaway she wanted to take to reconnect. The irony was thick. "I'll get it," I said, patting her knee as I stood. Through the frosted glass of our front door, I recognized the figure of the process server holding a thick envelope. I opened the door. "Mark Evans?" he asked, just to confirm. I nodded. "These are for you," he said, extending the envelope to me. I took it, thanked him as if receiving a routine delivery, and closed the door. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from anticipation. "Who was it?" Megan called from the couch, looking up from her phone. I walked back into the living room, envelope in hand. She noticed my expression, and a faint frown creased her brow. "Mark?" I held out the envelope to her. "It's for you, actually," I said quietly. Confusion flitted across her face. She sat up and took the envelope. As she opened it and pulled out the sheaf of papers inside, I watched her eyes carefully. She skimmed the first page, and I saw the blood drain from her face in real time. "In the matter of Evans versus Evans," she whispered. Her eyes darted to the bold print. "Petition for divorce." Immediately, her hands began to tremble. "What is this?" she stammered, though she knew perfectly well. I felt an odd calm as I finally dropped the pretense. I stepped back, hands in my pockets, and regarded her with a cold gaze. "It's exactly what it looks like. I've filed for divorce." Megan shot to her feet, the papers fluttering in her grasp. "Divorce!" "But we're doing counseling. I signed the agreement. I thought—" Her voice cracked, panic and betrayal warring on her face. "You said you were going to try to work this out." I gave a short, humorless laugh. "No. I said I wouldn't make rash decisions and that I'd try, for a while." "Well, consider these 2 weeks my attempt. It didn't change anything, Megan. I can't forgive you. I won't." Her lip quivered. She looked down at the documents, flipping through and seeing the evidence attachments, the legal language stripping her of any claim to support. You planned this all along," she realized aloud, voice small and horrified. The post-nup, the counseling, it was all just to set me up? To protect myself, I corrected, my tone harsh. Did you think I'd just forget that you humiliated me? That I'd ever trust you again? I gave you a chance to show your true colors, and to your credit, you cooperated. Now there's no room for he said, she said in court. It's all right there in black and white. You admitted to the affair repeatedly, to me, to a therapist. You signed away your rights. This divorce will be swift, and you'll get nothing. Each word hit her like a slap. She swayed slightly, reaching a hand out to steady herself on the arm of the couch. The color in her cheeks was gone, replaced by a sickly pallor. "Mark, please," she whispered. "Don't do this. I know I hurt you, but I thought we had a chance." She stepped toward me, desperation in every line of her face. "We can still fix this. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Just please." "Stop!" My voice was sharp, and I saw her flinch. "It's too late. It was too late the day you let another man into our bed." She cringed, a sob escaping. "He was never in our bed. I never brought him here. It doesn't matter," I snapped, finally letting some of my true anger show. "You blew up our marriage for a fling with a guy who couldn't even be faithful to his own wife. Did you really think there'd be no consequences? That you could just cry a few tears and I'd take you back like nothing happened?" She shook her head frantically. "No. I mean, I hoped you'd forgive me. Not like nothing happened, but because we love each other. I still love you, Mark. I never stopped." I stared at her, incredulous. "You have a twisted way of showing love. If this is love, I want no part of it." Tears streamed down her face. "I deserve this," she said, voice breaking. "I know I do, but please, if there's any part of you that still cares about me at all, please don't ruin me completely." She gestured with the papers, nearly dropping them. "You're taking the house, my portion of our savings. I'll have nothing. And my job, everyone knows. I can't even go back there. I'm so ashamed. My life is ruined." I felt a flicker of something at that. Was it remorse? Pity? I wasn't sure, but I hardened myself against it. This was what I had set out to do. Leave her with the same emptiness and loss I'd felt. "You have your life," I said flatly. "That's more than I felt I had when I realized what you'd done. You'll figure something out. Maybe Mommy and Daddy can take you in for a while." It was a cruel dig. Her parents were well off and conservative. I had indeed sent them a letter detailing why I was divorcing their daughter, complete with a few choice pieces of evidence. I knew the shame from that would cut deep. Her father had called me just yesterday, furious at Megan on my behalf, apologizing for her behavior. They would deal with her, he had promised. I imagined that fallout would be another blow awaiting her. The mention of her parents made Megan cover her face. "Oh God, my dad. What did you do?" she moaned. "I told the truth," I replied. "Actions have consequences, Megan." She dropped her hands and stared at me through red, swollen eyes. Grief was giving way to anger now, hurt pride, and a sense of betrayal blooming on her features. "You're enjoying this," she said bitterly. "You lied to me, pretended to give me hope. You've been planning every move just to punish me." I met her glare head on. "Enjoying it? No. There's nothing enjoyable about any of this. But I'm satisfied that justice is being served. You earned this." She let out a hollow, despairing laugh, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "I thought you were the decent one, the kind one. What happened to you?" That barbed question hung in the air. I felt a brief flash of indignation. You happened to me, I said quietly. You turned me into this. Do not forget that. She stood there trembling, clutching the divorce papers to her chest like a lifeline, even as they spelled her downfall. Whatever fight had momentarily flared in her wilted away. She seemed to shrink in on herself. So that's it, she murmured. After 7 years, it's just over like this. I ran a hand through my hair, steadying myself. There was a slight tremor in my own limbs now that the confrontation was nearly over. It was over the moment you decided to cheat, I said. The rest has just been formalities. Megan drew a ragged breath and nodded, as if accepting a death sentence. The room felt eerily quiet now, aside from our breathing. Finally, she looked at me with defeated eyes. Is there someone I can call to pick me up? Or will you at least let me stay here tonight? Her voice was fragile, each word costing her. I think it's best if you go, I replied, maintaining an even tone. Pack a bag. You can stay with a friend or with your parents. But I don't want you here anymore. Each word was like another blow, but she simply bowed her head. I'll go to my sister's, she whispered. She moved as if on autopilot then, turning and trudging upstairs. I heard her soft sobs echo down as she gathered some belongings. I didn't follow. I couldn't. Part of me wanted to collapse, to scream, to cry, anything to release the tension of the last 2 weeks, of the last hellish month. But I held it together. When she came back down, she had a small suitcase and her purse. Her eyes were hollow, her cheeks damp. I opened the front door for her. She paused in the doorway, one hand on the frame. For a second, I thought she might say something, perhaps one final apology, or an angry retort. But she just looked at me, a long, searching look, as if trying to find any love left in my face. I gave her nothing in return, my expression stone. Megan nodded to herself, a tiny, defeated motion. Then she stepped out into the cool evening air. Without another word, she walked down the path to her car, shoulders hunched, and drove away into the gathering dusk. I closed the door behind her and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It was done. Underscore, 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 underscore. In the weeks that followed, the consequences of our shattered marriage rippled outward. True to form, the legal side was swift and efficient, just as I had engineered. Megan, faced with overwhelming evidence and the agreement she'd signed, had no grounds to contest. Our divorce was finalized quietly in a matter of a few short months. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she moved in with her sister for a while, and later with her parents. The last I learned, she was working a basic retail job. Her career in HR was effectively over after word of the affair spread in her professional network. The shiny circle of friends who once admired our marriage had, for the most part, melted away from her. Some were scandalized by what she'd done. Others simply didn't know what to say. She became a ghost on social media, going silent under the weight of gossip and shame. As for Thomas Keller, his fall was just as hard. His wife, Laura, followed through on her intentions. By the end of that year, he too was divorced. The last time I saw Thomas was at a preliminary hearing for the civil suit Laura filed. Alienation of affection, a relic law in our state that she decided to use to seek damages from him for the collapse of their marriage. I was there as a witness, ready to testify and supply evidence if needed. Cornered and disgraced, Thomas settled the case privately to avoid a protracted public spectacle, paying a substantial sum that Laura later told me she planned to put toward their kids' college funds. Professionally, he never recovered either. No company of equal stature wanted to hire a sales exec with that kind of baggage. One afternoon, about a year later, I received an unexpected email from Megan. It was short and stark, an update that our house, now solely mine, had finally been removed from her name legally, and a brief line that simply read, "I am sorry for everything. You were right. Megan." I stared at that line for a long time. I never replied. By then I had moved on, living in a new condo downtown, having sold the suburban house that held too many memories. I was seeing someone new, tentatively opening my heart again, though trust came slower this time. Sometimes I still wonder if things could have been different, if we could have healed without such extreme measures. But then I recall those painful moments, the whiff of strange cologne, the lies, the image of my wife in another man's arms. I remember the cavernous hurt and anger that consumed me. And I know that the path I took, however ruthless, was the only way I could reclaim my sense of self and justice. In the end, I learned that betrayal changes a person. It certainly changed me. I had loved deeply, and I had been deeply wronged. In response, I became something colder, more calculating, at least for a time, a man capable of plotting an elaborate revenge. Was it worth it? As I stand here now, looking at the life I've rebuilt from the wreckage, I believe it was. I didn't get my old life back. Nothing could bring that naive happiness back. But I got something else. Closure. Megan and Thomas paid the price for their choices, and I survived mine. Justice in its own way was served. And as I move forward, I do so a little wiser, a little more guarded, but free from the shadows of that painful chapter, a chapter I closed with a final, irrevocable settlement of accounts.